excited to be here in the Jedi Zone. We're so excited. My name is Lisa Wisner, and I couldn't be more proud to be here with you in this Jedi Zone, where we're going to be talking about conversations related to justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. And I am so excited to have my family here with me. Dr. Tammy, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Dr. Tammy, success strategist and literacy educator. I help you move in the direction of more and prepare for what's next. And we're going to do it on this show today, and we'll be back.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And yes, tag you're it, Zoraida. Boom.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa, for including me in this awesome conversation with you and Dr. Tammy. I am Zoraida Nanez James. I'm a STEMpreneur. I'm a science educator, and I help to prepare the next generation to think critically.
Oh my goodness. I love how y'all introduced yourself. See, I did not come prepared.
You did come prepared.
Strategist, I don't know what you said. I was like, I did not have that intro down. And then Zoraida, could you say yours again? Because I love what you said. I don't think I've heard you talk about yourself like that before.
I'm learning to kind of share who I actually am and what I do. So my name is Zoraida Nanez James. I'm a STEMpreneur. I'm a science educator, and I help to prepare the next generation to critically think and ask questions.
Oh,
love it.
STEMpreneur. I love it. And so I just want to introduce, I guess, the session today, because today we all three felt very strongly about sort of giving a little bit of context related to an event that we're hosting. Now, these Jedi Talks are really a conversations that's outside the scope of the event we're hosting, but we want to make sure we mention the event so you know it's going to be going on and what sparked the need for these events. So, Dr. Tammy, do you want to tell us what event we have going on that you are the curator of?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, we have our TEDx Cole Park event. And it will be held May 1st, 2020. Yes, in about 4 weeks, maybe 5, but it's coming fast. I was thinking, oh my goodness, about 5 weeks away. And so we want you to join us, and you can go to the website and join us already. You can buy your tickets. Yes, and they're going fast, literally, y'all. Y'all better get in there and join us. And you can go to TEDxColePark.com/2021 and definitely join us. There it is on the screen down there. Join us. And we have some amazing talks. And guess what? Our theme just happens to be Jedi. And it's on May 1st. So we are saying, may the 1st be with you.
Yes, may the 1st be with you. I love that. Oh, Dr. Tammy, you were so good at selling that theme. And so for those of you who are watching right now, if you want to connect with us further, you don't have time to stay on as we have this conversation about Jedi, you can go to our website, which is poweruptalks.org/Jedi, a space where we share talks that power you up, and we're totally committed to giving you conversations that move you in the direction of more. Did I
and prepare for what's next?
Dr. Tammy, I'm starting to talk like you. I said that on purpose, but the point here is we are in this space together, and I almost feel like playing some music because I'm just so fired up about talking about Jedi, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So, Dr. Tammy, you're the curator of our event, so I know you probably have a frame of mind in regards to what is a Jedi, right? So, do you want to get us started and talk a little bit about what being a Jedi means to you?
Well, as we know that you must tap into your power, right? Because it's a Jedi. Anybody know? So all of you Star Wars fans out there, I know you probably have your idea. And so we're playing on that just a little bit. Yeah. But in this space, we're talking about justice and eliminating barriers and equity and giving people, each person, access to what they need. We are tapping into diversity and including all people. So you hear us talking about being inclusive. And then, of course, inclusion is the I, right? So that's just this sense of belonging and valuing people and amplifying the voices of those who have been muted, which that may come back around again as well.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so another thing, I feel like we're going to bring in all this stuff. So we literally the reason we're late, if you were waiting for us and you're like, where are these people? We're late because we were at the rehearsals of our TEDx Cole Park. And we just heard a talk where one of the speakers is going to be talking about unmuting, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
And I wasn't going to say that, Lisa. I was going to keep that a secret, but I was just letting them know that we're going to be throwing in some nuggets. So stay tuned, and you got to join us for each episode, and we'll be announcing them because they won't necessarily be every week, but we are doing a series of these leading up to the May 1st event, the TEDx Cole Park event. And therefore, we're going to be dropping some nuggets and some little hints on what you should expect. So we're hoping you'll join us. I'm hoping you'll join us today. But as you stay with us.
In fact, we have one person who has just joined us and said, "Good evening, Jedis."
Good evening.
In the world, it's evening. Welcome to the show. And hopefully this conversation will help you sleep well tonight.
Yes.
So Zoraida, do you want to just maybe chime in and tell us a little bit about what being a Jedi means to you?
I think being a Jedi is really about meeting people where they are, and for them to realize that we're all here to learn, right? About these topics of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we welcome you. We welcome your presence in our space. And we want to make sure that people know this is a safe space to come in and just learn and ask questions. Like I'm an educator, so I encourage students, there's no such thing as a bad question. They raise their hand and they're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you will never learn if you never ask.
Yes.
You will never learn if you never ask. But also to come in with that open mindset of, are you willing to learn? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to learn? Are you willing to get maybe uncomfortable? And I tell my students this, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to have lots of stuff. You know that, Miss Dr. Tammy, right?
Yes.
I said, if you feel uncomfortable, that means you're learning something. If it's a space that you're like, oh, I got this, it's super easy, then you're really in your comfort zone and you're not growing, right? You're going to have a little bit of those growing pains, that we want to provide that space for you to grow.
Oh, and I love that you said that, because that's exactly what this space is. So just so you all know, is that we will have some of those conversations, and some of them will be uncomfortable. Well, we're asking you to hang out with us and join in these courageous conversations and add to them. And let's just educate the world together. Yeah.
So I wanna get us started with just bringing some context into Jedi-ness, right? So we have your definition, Dr. Tammy, but one of the things I want to connect the dots here on is we live here in South Texas. We live in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we're hosting an event where, as we were thinking about the context of the event and as it relates to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we started to unpack how this actual space that we're going to have the event was not seen in the same light as everybody did. And I think one of the things we just want to bring to light here is that you may all walk the same road, but you all have a different experience, right? So we may be all driving down Ocean Drive, which is where Cole Park is, where we're having our event, and we all have a different experience with that. And so I think that's where I want to start our conversation with that, Dr. Tammy, with just thinking about, like, I came here in 1999 from Kenya, and growing up as a Kenyan child, I was raised thinking like, everything is great. I feel like, we didn't really learn a lot about the Black history, I guess, here in the United States. When I came here and I started learning more about the disparity when it comes to opportunity, with the need for equity. Why do we need equity? What marginalized communities? What is that? So as an immigrant, I guess you could say I have a different experience of Cole Park than I think you do, Dr. Tammy. And I don't know whether you too, Zoraida, like you grew up in a different community. So I don't know. I want to hear from you, Dr. Tammy. Tell me a little bit about the history of, just historically growing up in communities that we feel like we have to check ourselves. What does that feel like?
Well, and I will say my parents did an amazing job at making sure that we had fun and we engaged, but we didn't really go to Cole Park. We went to the neighborhood parks, the parks that are on our block, in our neighborhoods, in our community. We went to the parks there, and that's where we hung out. When we went down close to Cole Park, in an area close to Cole Park, and for some of you that have never been in our city, we have this long beach. We call it the T-head, generically, but it's a long stretch along the coast where you can go on to the seawall. You can go, there's a beach, there's parks, there's all along there, there's several things. But we went to the seawall area. We didn't necessarily go down to where the actual park was. That's kind of where we went to watch the fireworks and did things like that. We went skating. We did all of that on that side of the street, that stretch that I'm talking about. And that stretch was actually closer to the neighborhoods where the Black families, or, you know, those who were not affluent, lived. And so that's where we stayed. We stayed on that side of it. Now, growing up, I didn't realize that. Like, this is like an adult epiphany, right? This is later because my parents were like, well, let's just go. And we went. But there was like a point right before we got to Cole Park where we didn't really hang out. Like, that's not where we went to hang out. Now, we did drive. Like, we just want to take a drive through. Like, we're not stopping. We're not hanging out. We're just taking a drive through that area. And so when people think about Cole Park, and I think about even taking, you know, my boys there now, I don't think of it the same. It's very different from the way I knew it. Like, we didn't go there. We went to our neighborhood parks. Of course, now that's a whole nother conversation about the way they upkeep neighborhood parks. But the neighborhood parks was the hangout. That was where we hung out with our friends and people who looked like us and was around the same socioeconomic status. That's where we hung out. We didn't hang out at Cole Park. So that's really new to me as an adult. Like, I didn't go to Cole Park until I was in college. Like, go and hang out and like actually know that I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And okay, so like one of the things I know that's connecting the dots for me here is that, you know, we go to our neighborhood parks, but the reason we got on this conversation was because we were trying to think about, you know, equity in parks, right? In park maintenance. And what we uncovered was that Cole Park is the park of Corpus, right? It's like that's the park that's taken care of. But our community parks where, you know, we live, and even just kind of going a step further and thinking about, you know, the specific community of where you used to live, I guess, Dr. Tammy, you know, I think when we talk about a new harbor bridge being built, you know, and communities, I would just be as bold as to say being removed from those spaces. It feels a little bit like being kind of forced away from your comfort. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, it does. And, you know, it was, you know, like I said, like growing up, we didn't really, well, my parents probably did because they grew up in a very different time. So let me just be clear about that. Like my parents grew up during time when it was very segregated in the city, and that was during their time. And so for me, it was a little different because we were able to move about and a little freer. Yeah. However, my parents didn't make it seem like that. So even though that probably was the case for them, for me, we were just happy to get out of our neighborhood. For me, it was like going out of town, like going to Houston, Texas, or San Antonio, Texas. It was like doing that, even though it was in Corpus Christi. And so we didn't see it as that. And I think, you know, that made the experience better, because probably had I known what I know now, I probably would have had a lot of lip, as my mom would say. But I didn't experience it like that. Like, it was actually considered a treat for us to go. And that can be seen as positive or negative when we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion. But as a kid, it was like a treat, like in the good sense.
Yeah. So it was a treat to go to the good park.
Well, we didn't go to the park. Like I say, we still didn't go to the park. We went to the T-head. We went to the seawall. Like we didn't. Like I didn't go to the park at all until I was probably in college. And that's when I went to the park, like to actually sit, hang out, or swing or whatever, was when I was an adult. But growing up, we would go to the seawall, which is, you know, right there. So it may be a half a mile away.
Where the park is. Like, if you're not in Corpus Christi, then you don't realize this. Yeah. She was at the park. Like, literally, she just had to go a few more, like, steps.
Yeah, it may be a half mile, maybe a quarter mile. Yes,
it's right there. Like, if you can go to the heads, you can go to the park, right? So, but you didn't feel welcomed at the park, maybe, right? So maybe it just didn't feel like the kind of park that, you know, that your community goes to, right? Your community.
Right. So we didn't go to it. So we didn't know whether, like, as a child, I didn't know if I was welcomed or not. I just know we didn't go. Yeah. Now, of course, as an adult, in hindsight, I realized that there were certain people, because where it's located, It's on the, like I said, it's on the coast. So that's where all the $1 million, $1 billion homes are. Like that's where the mansions, we could used to call them, right?
The big houses. The big houses.
The technical definition of that, but that's what we would call them, the mansions. That's where they are. But we didn't go on that side where those homes started. That's what we did. We didn't cross that line as far as hanging out and playing and getting out on the grass, that sort of thing. Like I said, we would drive by there to just say, oh, one day we'll leave, right? That is dreaming, but we didn't necessarily stop.
Yeah.
We didn't stop. Yeah.
And that's such a different lens of my Corpus Christi, I guess you could say.
Yes. So tell us about your lens of Corpus Christi.
Yes.
So because you came in the 90s, which is after what I'm talking about. What the year I'm talking about is probably like 96, 97. And so you came after that when I finally went to Cole Park about 96, 97. Yeah. And so you were here in 99. So tell me about your experience. Like, how did you experience Corpus? Like in general, like how it's situated. And then of course the Cole Park.
And I can say two things, one, I came here from Kenya. So that's kind of like, I was an immigrant, but second, I came here on a scholarship to play sports, to play golf. And I realized as soon as I got here, Black people don't play that much golf here. Like it was very clear to me because I was the only one. And I think the reason why I felt like I was the only one is because I felt people looking at me, if that makes sense. Like it almost felt like I had a crowd because I was Black. Does that make sense? So it wasn't like so much like, oh, she's so good. It was like, wow, we've not seen that before, So
can I give you my experience of that before we go on and talk about the Cole Park thing?
Yeah.
But, that's exactly what it was. It was like, but it wasn't from the standpoint like, what is she doing? It was more like, wow, amazing. Yeah. Like, oh my goodness, I'm following this girl. Like, where is she going? So it was from that. It was just, representation matters.
Yes.
Absolutely. It really does.
I was going to get to that because I think like, some of the things that were happening, I realized that because I was being seen, like in the tournaments we would play, like, you're going through, like, especially like if we went to play in like Arkansas, Louisiana, like I'm like the only Black person there, right? And there was some gas stations we would never stop at, some places where I know the coach would even say we have to drive through here, and I remember feeling as an immigrant like I didn't get it, right? So I would, you do your research, you have to do history class, right? And you come here and you're taking your freshman seminar courses, which include the history classes. You start to learn more about the history, and you realize that, wow, just me being myself the way I am is kind of like putting a spotlight on an opportunity that may not be seen. And so, one of the things I do now is I'm trying to distill the myth as golf being a rich white man's game. I really believe that I didn't grow up seeing golf like that when I was in Kenya. It was a sport, like you just play golf, And so it wasn't like when I got here, I realized, you guys.
Lisa's learning too.
It's different. So anyway, but I don't want to take away from the fact that I love my Corpus Christi. And honestly, when I got here, when you were telling me about your experience at Cole Park, I felt hurt by Cole Park because I felt like, why did Cole Park do that to my Dr. Tammy? Because I love Cole Park. And I love, like, even I have a family now, 3 boys. And when we think about going to Cole Park, it's just joy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like that was not available for you. Because when you were a child, why didn't you have that joy? I mean, Cole Park is huge, and you see the bay, and like it's just huge. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. Please Google Cole Park if you've never seen Cole Park, and just see how amazing our Corpus Christi is. And how dare any community, whether now or even in the future, make anyone feel that they don't feel welcomed in a space that as a common human, we should all feel comfortable in this human space. You know what I mean? Like we're all in this human thing together. And you telling me that made me feel a little bit like we need to have these conversations now so that it doesn't happen again. I think the reason why people may not feel comfortable in certain spaces. I know sometimes we go to places and it's like, oh, I just don't feel comfortable here because you don't feel welcome. You know what it feels like, right? And the pier, Andrea Johnson is watching right now, and she put the pier, the fishing. I don't even fish, but I would go to see people fishing. There's just so much that goes on at Cole Park. And yes, wow, it is truly amazing. And so I want to bring it back, I guess, just in the interest of time, to talk specifically about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so let's talk a little bit about how could we eliminate barriers here in our community to resources and opportunities, Dr. Tammy and Zoraida. I know, Zoraida, you're focused on, I guess you could say, environmental justice, right? So maybe you want to speak a little bit about your work in, just bridging the gap, maybe providing justice in regards to the environment.
So Lisa, I don't know if a lot of you know, I've been part of the Gulf of Mexico Alliance, which is a regional organization that has it started in 2005. So I was actually a graduate student at A&M Corpus Christi, packing bags for the very first conference. And just to make the story short, I've just been selected as one of the state reps, right, for education and engagement for that organization. So I'm super happy. I started off packing bags.
What's the name of it again?
It's the Gulf of Mexico Alliance. And so been asked to be on the steering committee that kind of leads the engagement and education aspect of that. There's different teams. There's fisheries, there's water quality, there's community resilience. But I guess I'm very blessed to be in that position. So if you're looking at environmental justice or just JEDI in general, it goes back to what you said, Lisa, is that representation matters, right? The voices that we bring to the table that have not been heard or have not been acknowledged, I feel like we can start to move forward, because we've been having this conversation since this organization began. And how can we do that? Because they do so much for the Gulf of Mexico. It was a place that we could come together as communities, state agencies, federal agencies, regional agencies. And that's been my take of Corpus Christi, right? I came here for graduate school. I'm originally from San Antonio. And came here for graduate school. I got my master's in biology and I studied ecology. So my focus was very narrowed with that, and then when I came back, I joined an organization where it did focus on some local issues, but I really worked regionally. So I got to see the Gulf states, not just in the US, but in Mexico and in Cuba. We worked with some of those organizations as well. So as far as environmental justice goes, we have some young folks that, another little tidbit, like Ms. Tammy says, that are going to be talking about that, and I'm working with them to look at how our voices can be heard, because the BIPOC community, indigenous communities, Black communities are disproportionately being affected by environmental issues, right? You're looking at things that we take for granted. A lot of people who have access to that: clean air, clean water, actual land to live on. So how does that translate to us being part of that conversation? We have to have representation. And I think me being part of the committee is a small step. I have a lot to learn, Lisa, from all of you. And I'm learning so much from just being part of TEDx. And that's going to be a big push for me, is how do we do that? We have to have people who know our communities, who know how they're being impacted. Because like you said earlier, I'm going to cut this short because I know I'm taking over for a little bit, is that we see things, the way that we have been raised, the way that we have been taught, that, that is the lens that which we see things. That dictates our behavior, that dictates the mindset that we have when we go into these meetings, that I consider the meetings that make the change, right? You have to be at the top sometimes to get that power, to make the impact, to be the change. There are lots of grassroots organizations that are extremely powerful, but at the same time, having allies to help us get to that influence where we can make changes in regulations, especially in the environmental realm.
So well said. Oh my goodness. And I don't want to take away from Dr. Tammy. Dr. Tammy is the one who said representation matters.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
And honestly, and for me, I just feel like what you just said is almost like drop the mic moment, because I think you've just connected the dots so perfectly in regards to making sure that the voices that need to be heard are the voices that are at the table, right? So like, I don't know, like who was in charge of the Gulf of Mexico Alliance. I'm looking at the website right now. Truly amazing. I'm going to drop the link in the chat if anybody wants to cheer on Zoraida. So you're going to be chairing this initiative.
So, excuse me?
You're going to be chairing this entire initiative.
No. I am part of one of the teams for the Gulf of Mexico. They're separated into different teams. We are part of engagement and education. So now I'm part of that steering committee who can bring things to the table as a whole group. Yeah. But just I don't believe the representation has been there at that level. So that's where I'm at right now. So I'm not chairing this whole initiative, but the initiative to really bring the conversation of Jedi, because we recently had fully serving the underserved conversation in January, and we had an individual come in and we talked about issues, redlining. What does that mean? Using GIS or geographical information systems so that you can actually see maps. Neighborhoods are not you don't have people of one color in these neighborhoods and just because that's the way it happens. There's an intentionality to that. And if you don't know what the history behind that, it's just not in South Texas. It's, it's in the North too. What that even is, what is redlining, and educating yourself about that. And that's the conversations we have, because in the Gulf of Mexico is so diverse. We have Vietnamese, we have Native American, we have Latinx communities, we have all different kinds of communities. And that was what that conference was about, to start connecting how we can reach out and how we can work together. One of the most powerful talks was about co-partnering. Going into communities and working together with those communities on environmental issues, but leaving something behind. You don't just take, you co-create things with them. And so you're a truly partner. Both sides are invested.
And Andrea adds in the chat, Andrea, we love you so much, but when you're at the meetings, they overlook you, right? So, we're bringing that.
I know.
Unmute,
it's coming back. It's coming back.
So, total plug for TEDx Co-Park. If you want to learn how to unmute yourself, no kidding.
TEDxCopark.com.
There's some powerful talks coming straight to you here live on May 1st. May the 1st be with you. Okay, so in case you don't know, we're going to be doing a series of these talks. So we're going to do today, we're really just going to be priming you and getting you ready for these conversations so that on Saturdays we're bringing them to you. So bring your questions. But today we're going to talk about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion together. And then following up, we're going to split them up and actually talk in details of how to have more justice, how to work towards inclusivity, equity. How do you create an equity lens in your decision making? And then next we'll talk about creating more diversity and inclusivity towards belonging. And so now for the last three, just very swiftly, I just want to bring up equity is defined as giving each person access to the resources they need to thrive. So, just talking in terms of my responsibility in terms of being a parent, and I always bring it back to being a parent because I feel like if you can do that, then you can probably do anything in a workplace. And I feel like if you're a parent, you don't just let your kids go take care of yourself. You got it, you make sure that your kids got it, right? You make sure that they have the opportunity that they need, and you make sure that, that if they can't, that you're there to support them. And I almost feel like that's the same lens when I think of equity. I think of we all want to get there. We all want to, not to kind of belittle this, but we all want to get to the end of the road. But if some of us need some extra help to get there, we should provide that, right?
Yeah, it's all about resources.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And opportunities. Yeah.
And opportunities. And then diversity. So diversity, Dr. Tammy, these are your definitions. I'm pulling.
It's okay. It's okay.
Diversity, the practice of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic groups, and also thinking about, different contexts in regards to domains of even learning, right? So we can think about all the different contexts that are the dimensions of diversity that we all experience. So acquired, inherent. So diversity to me is a difficult one, right? Because sometimes when people say diversity, what they mean is BIPOC, right? Right? They mean people of color, right? And so
and that's the thing. It can mean different things. It depends on which space you're in.
Yeah.
Just like you in the tech space, that may just mean women in general.
Oh,
you know,
yes, you're right.
Or, you know, it just depends on which space and it's different. But generally speaking, we do think it about, you know, Black, Indigenous, people in color, people of
Yeah.
color. So, yeah.
And so one of the points I wanted to make here was that, like, when I came here, like, the very first experience I had as an immigrant was filling out my arrival card and saying I was an alien, and I had to check the box that I was an alien. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, 18 years old, like, what?
Wow.
What?
I'm not an alien.
Nobody told me about that. You know, they should have been a class before you come to America. They're going to call you an alien.
Yeah,
so that
like
was the introduction to also being diverse, you know. And I almost feel like I'm not diverse. Maybe when I'm in the room, there's a diversity of thought, there's a diversity of people. But as a human, like, yeah, okay, fine, I could have diversity, but I am not diverse. Does that make sense? Like, it's not like the human being is the person who is diverse. We're all diverse then. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
So that's one point that I want to uncover. And I think our third episode, we're going to talk about diversity in detail.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
That's one thing that really bothered me when I got here was, you know, like, sometimes I felt like I got the scholarship because of my diversity. You know, when you start to feel tokenized and it just kind of like make you feel like that. Like,
ooh, that's a whole conversation.
I was like, yeah, I was going to say, I'll tell you
I'm writing that down.
What can I say? Honestly, like, thank you for my money to go to college because that's how I went to college. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you're on the cover of the magazine. Oh, there's a photo shoot about STEM because you're a computer science graduate. Oh, and you're Black. You're in every magazine. You know, you start to see it. You start to see how, wow, you're being called on to be in every picture because.
Or the cameraman is following you.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, okay. And then the next thing is inclusion. So inclusion is encouraging a sense of belonging by centering, valuing, and amplifying the voices, perspectives, and styles of those who experience more barriers based on their identities. And I guess with inclusion, you know, I do want to point out that, you know, we're talking about Jedi and we're talking about everybody feeling included, but I also want to point out that we do have an opportunity now to just speak just briefly, if you want, like candidly, about some of the Asian hate that's been going on in regards to our Asian community feeling included here as Asian Americans. And I think it's just been really hurtful for me to see these atrocities, you know, the murders, just even the sense of the humanity of believing that we can treat each other like this. You know, we talk about inclusion all day long, but I almost feel like we need to talk about safety of people feeling, you know, inclusion is one thing, but how do people feel included if they don't even feel safe, you know? And when we had all the unrest going on in regards to Blacks here in the United States, I didn't feel safe even taking a walk in my own neighborhood anymore. Like, I literally felt like, oh, I don't know, like what might happen if I'm taking a walk, you know what I mean? And so, so I think for me, the inclusion sometimes feels a little bit surface inclusion conversation versus the real need of feeling like safe, right?
Right.
Safety in inclusion, right? You can want to include me all day long and you say that you're creating an inclusive environment, but are you really if I don't feel safe to be included?
Or I don't feel like I belong. You may think you're including me, but I don't feel like I'm being included or belonging. So, So we'll talk about all that. We'll unpack all of that.
We'll unpack all of it. Andrea, we need to just get Andrea. Andrea, there's a square right there for you, right next to Dr. Tammy. And Andrea was an engineer token, woman and Black. Yeah, and it's fine, right? Representation matters because that's how we get there, right? We get to that point by being in those positions. But it's important to know that there is that feeling of, you know, you just want to be a human, you know?
That's when we come back to justice and trying to eliminate some of those barriers that are created from being in that position. Because when we're in that position and we are tokenized, then then there's these other barriers that you have to get past and making sure your voice is heard. And so all these kind of go hand in hand. And so, you know, I will say that we're going to segment these off and talk about them and focus on one, but just know we're going to talk about all of them every week. It's just that we're going to shift our perspective and our lens in one direction, or two. We do two at a time. So those of you who are joining us, just know that we're going to talk about all of them because it's very difficult to actually practice and put these things into action without, you know, one in isolation. Like if you do it in isolation, it's probably not effective. So you've got to do a little bit of all of them. They kind of work hand in hand. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about the conversation, right? So I think sometimes you don't have to be the smartest person. Like, I don't know everything. And I know that we're probably going to have differences in opinion when we're talking. So that's good. Because like Zoraida said, like, we learn, right? We learn when we're uncomfortable. So we want to make it uncomfortable. Andrea just chimed in that she's from Louisiana and she lived in an all-Black neighborhood and she had permission to go to the other school. Even just that, you know?
Permission. Ooh, there we go. We got to talk about that permission idea.
Yeah.
Ooh, with all of these terms. I'm going to write that down.
Write that down, Dr. Tammy.
Or somebody was, I don't know what it was, but somebody was talking about how, like, they bus people in, but, like, what does that even mean? Like, why aren't other people being bused to their schools? Like, right? So, like, why aren't, anyway, it was a whole.
I'm going to say a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I could talk about people being bused in and what that means to our children, right? So, like, what do our children grow up seeing and feeling like they don't belong because there's this disparity? Anyway, lots of stuff we can talk about, and we will be bringing it back. So in closing, I just want to thank everybody so much for joining in the chat, for watching this show. We want to make sure we're bringing you really good conversations in regards to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we will be back next week. And next week, we're going to talk specifically about justice and equity. So bring your questions, bring your conversations, bring your challenges. And Andrea, come on the show. We want you here with us in the space. Everybody should be on the space. And and so before we end, does anybody have anything to add before we end the show?
I'm just excited to have the conversations. I think some stories will come out, you know, maybe knowing the difference between equality and equity. I think we can all share some of those. So.
Ooh, that's a great point, right? So there is a difference.
It's gonna be good.
Yes, that's gonna be good. Dr. Tammy, anything to add?
Y'all just come back and join us. Just join us next week. Same time, same channel. Wherever you're watching this, you can catch us. And so we just invite you to join us. And, you know, like Lisa said, come prepared to take a few notes as well as share. So and share this out. Share this to a friend, you know, even today.
And you can also go to the poweruptalks.org/Jedi, and you can actually ask your question there if you want. So we have a section where you can actually put in your information and we'll be able to communicate with you in case you have any questions that you want us to address live. And so with that, I want to ask you all to help me say goodbye to everyone. Say bye-bye.
Adios. Bye-bye.